senior writer of the MMQB. You can check out the MMQB podcast with Albert Breer up on iTunes right now. Albert joins me here on the show. Albert, we were talking about Jerry Jones's defense of Ezekiel Elliott. And look, it's one thing to defend your player, but I took exception with his comments that there really wasn't a she-said side to this when it's pretty obvious there is a she-said side to this. What did you make of Jones's defense of his star player?
Well, Jerry's been very much in Zeke's corner really throughout. This goes back to last fall. He appealed to people at the NFL offices and wanted to get the process moving. And, I think a big part of this, Chris, and they won't ever admit to this, but one of the things that's been frustrating for the Cowboys, the league has a way of doing this with players that they may not fully trust, where they'll intentionally drag their feet. And it's almost like, a de facto probationary period where something happens and the league opens an investigation and the league will leave the investigation open and kind of let things play out for a little while and see if a guy can keep his nose clean. And for Zeke, you had the incident last summer, and then after the season, we had what happened on St. Patrick's Day, and we had what happened last Sunday night. And so there's been, this pattern that doesn't really relate to the domestic incident, but goes back to some of the issues he had with partying at Ohio State, where the league looks at it and says, well, can we trust this guy? And if we're going to, give this guy a punishment that's kind of a little bit more of a, hey, you better watch out now. Is he going to make us look bad on the other end of it? And, that's part of, I think, we saw it with Josh Gordon too. It's part of what this has been for Zeke Elliott, and I think it's frustrated the Cowboys because they want to find a way, one way or the other, to move past it. And unfortunately, because Zeke's slipped up a couple times since the incident in the summer, the league's left this thing open, and I think Jerry's just trying to drive a conclusion now.
How do you think the NFL eventually rules on all this?
I think he has a short suspension. That's my guess. And part of this, and you may remember going back to, and this is the end of the last decade when Roethlisberger got in trouble and Vic got in trouble. One of the things that they tried to emphasize to players was it doesn't have to, if you have an altercation, it doesn't have to be you throwing the punch. It's, are you putting yourself in situations where you're going to make your team or the league look bad? And I think that's part of that, that whole campaign, Protect the Shield and everything else. I think that's what's going to happen here with Zeke, where it's, we may not have been able to find guilt, but you put yourself in a position to make your team and make the league look bad. And for that, we're going to teach you a lesson. And so my guess would be that there's going to be a short suspension here. I think that the hope is, both from the team standpoint and the league standpoint, even though they may disagree on this particular matter, that this will be the thing that'll kind of create the wake-up call that both groups think Zeke needs.
Talking to Albert Breer, senior writer, Sports Illustrated, the MMQB, joining us here, Dan Patrick Show. Richard Sherman says all's well in Seattle right now. He and Russell Wilson, no problems there, said, and I'm paraphrasing, but said they're not the best of friends in the world, but they're 100% great as teammates. You believing that everything's fine in Seattle?
I think it's as fine as it has been, which is, look, when you're winning, this is seen as healthy tension. When you're not getting to the Super Bowl and the window seems to be closing, that tension can kind of go in the wrong direction sometimes. But I felt for a long time like the Seahawks have sort of thrived in this healthy tension, and there's that energy in that building. That's the way that Pete Carroll built that place. For that matter, that's the way that Pete Carroll built USC's program for all of those years. And so, I think a big part of this is going to be, the defense getting back to where it has been the last few years, and then the offense being able to shoulder the load. And we've seen this in the past with teams, and, you go way back, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, where teams that are historic on defense or have a chance to really create a lasting legacy on the defensive side of the ball and have to carry their offense, there is that healthy tension sometimes, and sometimes that can put on unhealthy tension. In fact, you saw it even more recently with the Jets when Rex Ryan was there. It's just, look, if they're winning, then it's manageable. If they're not, and they're not in the final 8, like they have been the last 5 years, then it becomes something else. A lot of this is going to ride on whether or not they succeed on the field.
I thought it was a smart move by the Lions to invite Calvin Johnson to come to training camp to sort of, was it a PR move? Was it a real offer? I'm not exactly sure at this point, but what do you think the chances are that we ever see Calvin Johnson on an NFL field again?
I don't think he's coming back. Look, the frustration with the Lions organization was part of his retirement, but I don't think it was the number one factor. As I understand it, the number one thing was really what it was taking that last year to get him back on the field from a physical standpoint, how beat up he was, and then the process he'd have to go through every offseason of getting himself back in shape and ready to go again. That can wear on guys. And, the losing plays into that. But, that last year, they were, that last year he was in Detroit, I know was frustrating for him from a physical standpoint. And I don't look at this as one of those things where, the guy is, has one off season and looks at it and says, now, okay, I'm ready to go again. It'd be hard for him physically to get back in a position where he's ready to play again. And, what we're seeing now from the organization is a new team president and a new general manager saying to him, hey, look, things have changed here. We'd like you to come in and check it out and see how much things have changed here so we can have a good lasting relationship with you going forward. But I don't think he's ever going to play again.
Talking to Albert Breer, senior writer at the MMQB.com, joining me here on the Dan Patrick Show. I was reading a piece that a guy that you work with and I know in Boston, Mike Giardi, wrote or reported, I guess, on Jimmy Garoppolo. And I know what I'm referring to. He wrote on Facebook. And I finished reading that, Albert, and it's like maybe Jimmy Garoppolo is the next great quarterback in the NFL. It's the effusive praise from the scouts he talked to and the former Patriots player that we up against. I don't know what to make of it. Are we now thinking that maybe Jimmy Garoppolo is the heir apparent to Tom Brady, or what are your thoughts?
Well, Chris, I think this is the most underrated storyline of the NFL offseason, that the Patriots hung on to Jimmy Garoppolo. The reason why, you have to consider what they gave up here and what they could have got. Right now they had him with a year left on his rookie contract, so you're trading him off to another team, and that team can either hold him on the roster at $1 million for 2017 or use that as leverage in a long-term negotiation. This wasn't a great draft year for quarterbacks. This wasn't a great free agent year for quarterbacks. And Jimmy Garoppolo has played recently. He played 2 games just 9 months ago. And so you had all that going for you if you're the Patriots, and that market was there for him. Next year, Sam Bradford could be on the market. Drew Brees could be on the market. Kirk Cousins could be on the market. The draft class promises to be a lot better with guys like Rosen and Darnold and Allen. And, oh, by the way, he's going to be on the franchise tag if you're trying to trade him next year. So the Patriots gave up just what would have been significant value coming back to keep him on the roster in 2017. To me, that leaves the door wide open for Jimmy Garoppolo to be the quarterback in 2018. And my sense of it is this is Bill saying – it's great that Tom Brady was that good at 39, and we're confident that he can be that guy again at 40. But it would be foolish of us to give up on to trade away a guy who we believe in, who's 25 years old at the position, and do that on the bet that Tom Brady's going to be the same 41, 42, 43 years old. And so, this just kind of gives Bill Belichick a chance to collect more data on where Tom Brady is physically, and then circle back and make that decision in 2018. But what's significant about it, in my mind at least, is what he's giving up to get there, which would have been a significant haul coming back for Jimmy Garoppolo.
Is it possible in your mind that Garoppolo and Brady are on the roster next season?
I don't know how you make it work logistically, because you're talking about, okay, so you tag him at $22 million, right? Tom Brady, I believe, is set to make $15 million in 2018. Can you have your starting quarterback making – because let's say we can agree, right, Chris, that Brady's not going to be back as the backup to Garoppolo, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to have Garoppolo at a minimum of $22 million for 2018, right? and Brady's going to be sitting there at $15 million. Now, he's always been amenable to taking less, but I can't imagine that if you're Tom Brady, you're going to sit there and say, I'm going to be okay with my backup making $7 million more than me. It's not just tagging Garoppolo. It's also, do you have to give Brady a gigantic raise? And it's just, and now you're talking about getting to, okay, what are you going to be spending on that position? That's going to be $45-50 million on that position alone. I mean, that's almost a 30-year salary cap. So it's just, and that's without even getting to how uncomfortable it could be then, So it's hard to envision a scenario where you have both guys. I'm sure Garoppolo wants to play, and he's waited long enough. And so, to me, I don't know how you get around 2018 being decision time for the Patriots when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo versus Tom Brady.
Before I let you go, anything we should know on the Colin Kaepernick front?
I'll tell you this. I will say this, Chris. I think one thing that a lot of people are missing here is the job of starting quarterback versus backup quarterback. Those are two different jobs. And I don't think he's a good fit in a lot of places at backup quarterback for a variety of reasons. Of course, there's all the extra attention he'd bring, the scheme fit. There's a zillion reasons why as a backup quarterback he's not a good fit a lot of places. But I think where the job opportunity could come is if there's an opportunity to be a starting quarterback somewhere, because that job is different. And, it could be as simple as a contender having a starter go down, doesn't have a good backup situation, and says we need to find a way to create a threat that's a little different to be fair to the other guys in our roster, because we are a contender right now. And so, to me, it feels like the ship sailed on him being a backup somewhere. And right now the opportunity for him would have to come with one of these emergency situations where a starter goes down and a team that's in a position to contend is desperate. But remember, the freak thing that happened with Teddy Bridgewater last August, that those things don't happen every year. So there's the chance that sort of situation may not even arise.
Hey, terrific stuff, Albert. I always appreciate the time, man.
You got it, Chris.
That's Albert Breer, the MMQB Sports Illustrated, joining me here on The Dan Patrick Show.
The Dan Patrick Show, weekday mornings on Audience.